Boom. It's like it doesn't quite believe you the first time. You sure? I'm pretty sure. First member, first reader, first writer. It'll help you to understand my response if you know that I know this person. If you didn't, you'd wonder how I responded in the way I did, as though I could read minds. So this writer says, I am scared out of my mind that I won't ever be able to get this right, to really trust and feel loved and loving. I'll bet you are. You're finally beginning to see how dangerous your present course is. You've been playing at real love for quite some time. And now you're beginning to see how going through the motions doesn't work. And there are, parenthetically, a lot of people out there who can identify with this. Go through the motions, read the books, still not happy and going, am I ever going to get this? Am I ever going to get this trust thing? You're realizing that not trusting and loving destroys your happiness every time, whether you're quoting the real love books or not. That's actually a good thing to realize that the old ways don't work, no matter what words you put to them or emotions you go through. But you don't need to be, in your words, scared out of your mind. You don't need to be afraid. Fear will stop your progress. So just see what you're doing. Aware. That's all. And consistently remind yourself what loving and trusting have looked like when you've done it in the past. See, I know that you have done it. I can't count how many people have said to me, well, I just don't know what loving and trusting look like. Yeah, you do. I was there when you did it, which is why sometimes I place such an emphasis on people being physically present so that they can feel it deeply, so that later when they're not, they can be reminded of it. Way easier to remember moments of feeling loved than it is to imagine them. So those of you who are wise people, when you can see somebody trusting, you can see it in their face. Sometimes it's helpful to say, right now, you're trusting. In the beginning, people don't even know they're doing it. Kind of like learning in any kind of sport. Very often, people don't know they're doing it right the first few times. Tell them so that they can replicate it. So it's helpful to tell people when they're trusting. And I can tell you, you've trusted in the past. Remember those moments you have felt peaceful. You're afraid now because you've just forgotten. You're protecting yourself. When you get afraid, you automatically react with defending and thinking. Right now, you are thinking, I am so afraid that I'll never get this. And your head is just going bzzz, instead of trusting. It's completely counterintuitive to trust when you're afraid. I get that. When you're afraid, you protect yourself. Everybody knows that, right? Any idiot knows that. Yeah, that's the problem. All idiots know that. The wisdom is in not protecting. Now, sure, if a lion is in midair and about to take your head off, then maybe you want to run. But in our personal lives and in relationships, no. You continue. I feel like I'm sitting in a pigsty and there's a beautiful banquet laid out on a table right next to me, but it's behind a glass wall and I can't touch it. Nice metaphor. And true for you. Happiness is so available. It's within our reach. But we sit in a pigsty. We sit in poop because we were placed there from childhood. Everybody else is sitting in the same sty, and we're too afraid to do what it takes to just get up and move to another world. We're afraid of making mistakes. We're afraid of the unknown. It's all pretty crazy. I knew a lady once who came here and did an intervention, and for 5 glorious, unbelievable weeks, she felt safe, trusting, and loved. And then she started talking to her old friends who convinced her that she was deluded. And she began to, once she was convinced she was deluded, once they succeeded in making her afraid, then what happens is, once we've got back to the feeling of fear, then we look for justification of our fear. Then she was doomed. Because then, if you want to be afraid, you can look around and find proof that you should be everywhere. And that's what she did. Oh, oh, that's right. My husband does this, and oh, golly. And nothing changed. So all the love and trust that she had before, she threw it away because it wasn't consistent with what her friends had convinced her to feel. Afraid, like they were. Oh, don't trust people. You continue. I can tell myself you love me. I can reason that you wouldn't bother to reply at length, as I have on many occasions, if you didn't care about me. I can imagine myself reaching out and holding your hand, but I don't really feel it. I know. You're thinking. And while you're thinking and fearing, you can't feel it. So what do? Do what we've talked about many times. Replace your crazy thoughts with what's true. As long as you're thinking crazy thoughts, your doubts will become real. You'll see them everywhere. Anybody try this if you want to. I don't recommend it more than once, but get up in the morning and just go, I'm afraid. I'm so afraid. There's so many things that could go bad. And then write out a list of all the things that could go bad that day. And then say, oh my gosh, to each one of them. I'm so afraid. By the end, you'll be afraid. Really. But they're all lies. They're all suppositions. They're all things in the future. Not one of them is actually true. So what do? You replace your doubts with what you know to be true. Pick somebody in your life that you actually have felt loved by. So that person loves me. God loves me. I'm not alone. I have everything I'll ever need, nothing to fear. I'm good. It's all okay. That really works. You'll get back there. Relax. A few days ago, sometimes I tell you, stuff that members have sent in or written or called. Sometimes I just tell you about experiences. You never know what will sing to anybody's individual soul. But a few days ago, a man came to see me. 65 years old, chairman of the surgery department at a major medical school. For those of you who have not been to medical school, that's really quite an achievement. Surgeons are by nature kind of aggressive. That's why they went into surgery, so they could aggressively go after stuff. They cut stuff out, they sew stuff up. They're aggressive guys, whereas internal medicine people are by nature more contemplative. Not so much the surgeons. If it moves, cut it out. It's kind of a motto. And if you're the chairman of the surgery department, you would tend to be the most aggressive of the entire pack of lions. Very prestigious position and a well-known man. Bright, accomplished, and his life was a disaster. Disaster. He'd been unfaithful to his wife more times than he could count. He disrupted every family gathering, every holiday. At a recent family holiday, I think Christmas, I don't remember exactly, he punched his 40-year-old son in the face. He's alienated every professional colleague he's ever had, has not a single professional friend. Has people that he'll do presentations with, but only barely, because they can barely tolerate doing it with him because of who he is. He stays in his job only because of the prestige of his publications, his surgical innovations, the fame of his name. Wreck of a life. For reasons almost beyond accounting, he came to see me. He was not too terribly far away for a professional convention, and sat down and attempted to, it was kind of an interesting combination of charming me and intimidating me simultaneously, which was mildly amusing, and as though he were entertaining me almost. I just reached out and put my hand on his leg. He stopped talking. I asked him a couple of questions. He was dumbfounded that I was not entertained. He said, without any prompting from me, "I'm in so much pain." I said, "I know." I put both my hands in the middle of his chest. It's a little awkward leaning forward doing that, but worth it. After a few seconds, he said, "I'm about to tell you to get your blank blank hands off me or punch you in the head." I said, "I know. I don't care." And I kept talking to him. And then I got up and sat next to him and just held him. Dr. Prestigious, nobody could possibly imagine him having even a soft moment. And he just cried, poured out his heart, the emptiness of his life, the crimes that he'd committed against his wife, his children, against colleagues. Just his wounds just bled. At one point he said, "Is this real?" There's more to the story, but it doesn't matter at this point. It's what everybody wants. Doesn't matter how hard we look, doesn't matter how tough we appear. We just want that. And this man had been in therapy for, let's see, he was 65, almost 30 years. And all he'd ever gotten to was a very incisive, clear, beautifully outlined analysis of his pain. But his pain had never been touched. Nobody knows how. Love does that. Didn't have to be me, could have been you. But love cuts through all that. Very fun to watch. It's enormously touching and gratifying and like a privilege. A woman came in to see me again recently. I know there's a parade of people out on my driveway. And although she'd come for an intervention, she sat down and then argued with everything I had to say. Everything. Every sentence I said. Her next word was but or no. She had a defense for everything. And yet, nothing was working in her life. Finally, she couldn't stand what some psychologists call the cognitive dissonance. The difference between what she was hearing and what she believes, or sometimes used to refer to the difference between what we know and how we behave. It makes us crazy to have a difference between our beliefs and what we're hearing. Just nuts. We either have to change what we believe, or we have to kill whoever is giving us this dissonant message, or dismiss it. So she stomped out of the room halfway through the first day that she was here. Stomped out of the room, and a few seconds later came back in and said, "I can't do this. This is just too weird." I let her go. The intern who was here said, "What do we do?" "Nothing. Just, we'll wait. We'll wait and see." 45 minutes later, she comes back and says, "This is weird, you know." I said, "Yeah, kind of. But you're in an incredibly deep pit. You've been alive for 5 decades. There's no light in your life, no light in the pit that initially was dug for you and that you have dug deeper to the point where you can't even see sunshine. There's no light, there's no joy, and you stay in the pit. And when I lower a rope or a ladder to you, you tell me that it's weird. up to you what you call it, but it seems a little weird to stay in the pit, doesn't it? She heard it and is laughing now. It wasn't very funny to her at the time. There's a lot of pain in the world, and it cripples us. So what we do as we expose people to real love is give them a chance to get out of a pit that just seems to have no bottom. Or at least we spend the rest of our lives looking for the bottom. It's not our fault that we're in it, but we dig it deeper. The only tools that we've ever had in our hands are shovels. That's what was put in our hands. And so what do? We dig. We dig and we dig, hoping that there's something on the other side. Well, I suppose, China. Actually, I don't know what's geometrically on the other side of the earth from this location, but that never works. I know a woman who was very alone, very unhappy. She came for an intervention, spent the weekend, came for a retreat, in fact, and she wrote and said this: I just wanted to let you know that I'm feeling happy and not scared of the future, like I always used to be. The difference is that it feels like the love I have found will always be available. Perfect. Because the love that you get during an intervention or at a retreat or at a seminar or whatever, that alone isn't going to change your life. It might change your life in the moment. It's what you trust and carry with you. This is what you've been looking for. Couldn't be happier. You continue. This is about the only thing I feel sure of. And the rest, relationships, business, health, finances, being approved of, just don't seem to matter like they used to. It's like someone just said, I don't have to keep hauling an anvil up the side of one of the great pyramids anymore. People have got a whole bunch of good metaphors today. I should write these down. Funny to think, you continue, that the peace was there all the time, but might as well have been encased in 20-foot thick concrete. I could have lived this way the rest of my life. I'm glad that I don't have to. Yeah, no kidding, me too. When we feel loved, everything becomes simpler. Without it, every chore is complicated. I've seen brilliant, competent people when they're afraid they can't do anything, can't get out of bed in the morning. This woman says, I own my own home and I need help with my roommate. I've asked him to help with the cleaning of the common areas, mainly the kitchen and the passageway leading to his bedroom. Pretty minimal requirements since that's where he lives. He agreed to mop the floors and clean the countertops every 2 to 3 weeks, but he's not been adhering to the agreement. I don't want him to leave the house, but I also don't want to be the only one doing the cleaning. It feels like I'm taking care of yet another man. You got to stop this, kid. For your own mental health. You tell him that you'll have a written schedule on the wall. This is for your benefit. This isn't a scheduling problem. This is a you feeling worthwhile problem. And if he fails to keep it, then you'll talk to him about it one more time. If he does it again, then he's out. Right then. Not with a warning, not, well, if you do it again, out. No joking. It's no wonder that you get angry so often. Now, let me briefly explain to those of you who are watching. I know her, and she has spent, my goodness, decades angry, long before her roommate came in. So back to her. You let people use you over and over, using excuses like, well, I don't want him to leave my house. You did the same thing with your several past husbands and with your many past relationships. Oh, well, I don't want to have him mad at me. Well, I don't want to have him leave me. And what's the rest of that sentence? Leave me alone. You think you're being nice. You're wrong. You're just being used. You think you can handle it and you can, sure, for a while, but then it builds up and the anger blows, and that's why you walk around like a simmering volcano all the time. It has to stop, or you're going to make yourself crazy. No more. You are worth more than that. You can find another roommate. You don't have to put up with this behavior, this feeling of being used that just leaves you simmering. By the way, just a parenthetical comment that doesn't have a whole lot to do with, well, yeah, I guess it does have to do with love. Your requirements of him are pathetic. They're minimal. They're less than minimal. You say that he has to wipe off the countertops every 2 to 3 weeks. My guess is that you wipe off the countertops every day. So why wouldn't he have to wipe off the countertops that he uses and clean the passageway to his own room every other day, which would be half of what you have to do? Again, it's a reflection of your lack of worth. It's not a housekeeping chore. Let's see, I think I have a Sylvie story here. I do. I want to interrupt with a Sylvie story. I was actually supposed to do another question first, but I was in the mood for this. And this one actually involves Sylvie's younger brother, Bruce. Bruce, age 2, got out a basket of trains and he was about to dump them on the wood floor outside the baby's room. But he turned to me and he asked, "Is Bonnie still sleeping?" I nodded my head. He said, "Okay," and he took them to the carpet to muffle the sound. This is just so sweet. It's just so thoughtful. So why would he be thoughtful? Because he feels loved himself, and because he has parents who consistently teach him that this is what loving looks like. When a child behaves selfishly, you don't have to beat him. You don't have to yell at them. You just consistently describe to them what loving and caring behavior is. Easy. Here's a woman who says, my husband and I got back from the state park. I washed the dog, took a shower. He washed his truck. He put away the chairs. He cleaned up the mess. He emptied the cooler, cleaned up the kitchen. He came into the bathroom and he said, "Oh, there you are," and started criticizing me for not helping him empty the cooler and do some of the other things. I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "I think you say that just so I won't bug you anymore." I asked, "What should I have said?" And he said, "How about, I'll try to do better next time and be more aware." You continue, "Yeah, maybe I should." Maybe. But then he went on about not wanting to ever go back to the park again if that happened, if he had to do all the work. So, baby, listen up. We've talked about how the key to your, again, this is somebody I know, the key to your success in a relationship is you being more loving. It always is. You do overreact to what he says because you don't want to hear it, not because he's being overly harsh. How else would he say to you every time we go to the park, "You come in and shower and then sit around while I do the work"? How would he say that? There isn't a perfect way for him to say it. You'd be offended at any way. So he's right. You don't tend to think of him in any given situation. You think of yourself. It's a reflexive, lifelong defensiveness. You don't think of him, so you start off selfish. Then if anybody speaks to you, rather than listen to the message about your selfishness, poof, you immediately become afraid, boom, and defend yourself. See, once you're afraid, you can always, like we've talked about before, you can always think of reasons to blame the other person. Oh, well, he's criticizing me. Well, any word that he describes about your behavior you would take as criticism. Well, he should have said it nicer. And yet you don't know another way to say it that's nicer. If there's a conflict, you immediately point out to him that he's at fault. You do it a lot. You were wrong to just go in and take a shower yourself, get yourself all comfortable while assuming that he would do all the work. Why should he? He actually works full time. You don't. And then you assume, for example, that when he gets home from work, he'll do half the chores around the house. So it isn't just about going to the park. You do this a lot. And sweetie, I love you. I'm not telling you to do anything. Just see it. That's it. Then you want sympathy for being persecuted. Wrong again. Be more selfless instead. If you want a happy relationship, you have to think of your partner more. But look at the paragraph above. You just feel hurt instead of saying what you could have said. You could have said, Fred, I was selfish for not helping you unpack and to do the work that's always required when we go to the park. I don't think of helping you before doing what I want. I was wrong. That is what you needed to say. Notice there's not even an I'm sorry in here. That's what he needed to hear. You didn't even think of that. You thought of being hurt so that you could be the victim and be stuck in your selfishness. The problem is you never have a happy relationship. You continue. I really felt attacked. And that's the problem. You choose to feel attacked all the time instead of just admitting you're wrong and correcting the problem. You say, so I did say to him, you've been really critical of me lately. So look what happened. You were selfish. He asked you about it. Instead of admitting your selfishness, you felt attacked. Then you attacked him. Can you imagine any world where attacking him would lead to a loving relationship? No. Then you say he walked out and he went into the office. And now I just really feel like he's being critical. You just attacked him again, over and over in this one email. Then you said, I guess I just didn't really feel that great after our call earlier today. Now she's talking to me. And now you're attacking me. You're saying, I didn't magically make you feel better on the call. So now I'm at fault too. He's wrong, I'm wrong. Don't even think about saying that you didn't mean to attack me here, because you did. You attacked me. You may not have been aware that you were doing it, but you meant to. You didn't accidentally attack me. You didn't accidentally use the word cauliflower. No, you blamed me for not making you feel better. So in just this one email, you've done nothing but attack. And yet you complain that what? Other people attack you, which we would call grossly hypocritical. Important that you see this. And I'm still not criticizing you. Keep doing it if you want to. But it's not going to work, because then you stay stuck, and that's the same as dead. If you're a victim, you're dead. You require your partner to make you happy, and if he doesn't, you blame him. You require me to make you happy. A lot of demands, and it's not working. You continue. So I was bummed out when we got home. You're bummed out a lot. You choose to feel bummed out. If you feel bummed out, that gives you an excuse for everything you then say. Do you see that? You can attack him, you can attack me, you can not cooperate in doing work. You can just go, I'm so bummed out. Wow, not a lot of energy to that. So, but you're stuck in jail that way. You're stuck in a jail that was created for you in childhood. But you keep walking back into the cell, even though the door is open. Walk out of the jail. Stop going back in. Here is how your email could have gone. This is how you can change your life. You could have said this. Not telling you you should have. Just showing you, because often people will say to me, well, but I don't know how to do that. Here you go. Here's an example of a way it could have gone. And I don't mean these exact words, it's just an example. I could give you 10 more. You could have said this. You and I, that's you and me, talked on the phone earlier, and I'm so grateful to have somebody who talks to me, loves me, guides me when I fall off the path. I can reach out anytime I want, and you're there. I take that love with me wherever I go. It changes everything. And today, when my partner and I went to the beach, I enjoyed every second. I got the trees and the birds and the grass waving and the sun and good food. It was nectar to my body and soul. And when we got back from the park, I was right there by his side, helping him unload everything and putting everything away. I love being with him, no matter what we're doing. At the park, loading the truck, unloading the truck, and when we were finished, I was grateful for the whole day. I'm just ecstatic. Notice that's really just a variation on the 5 truths. That is how you could have made the whole experience. But you didn't choose that. And effectively, if we don't choose what works, we're choosing what doesn't. And that is the problem. And baby, you're just doing what you've been taught all your life, but there's a way out. You say, but this is getting difficult for me, especially when I don't feel full. Blame me again. You would immediately feel full if you would choose grateful instead of demanding, selfish, and victim. So there's more to this, but I think the point's made. We don't need to keep going over it. We can choose gratitude. We can choose to see the truth of the very cool things we have in our life. Or we could dwell on what we don't have. We got too much to be complaining about what we don't have. Oh, I should mention that I talked to this woman about this particular situation, and stunningly, like way cool, she said, I was wrong to do that. I would have been much happier if I'd done it the way you described. And I need help in seeing how I do that consistently. Whoa, that's very exciting. But pay attention to this. So what I just said to her, to many people, would seem harsh, critical, condemning. No, it's the way out of the pit. Here's the ladder. And somebody keeps digging with their shovel. Well, eventually you'd say, put your foot on the ladder. You're digging the hole deeper. And many people then are offended that you talk to them more directly. And they stay stuck. She listened. She decided to trust. It's a beautiful thing to do. It really is a decision. New person writing. It says, these nights I'm reading your blogs and enjoying them a lot. I noticed that I had read them already several times, and most of the time you're just saying the same principle again and again, telling the truth about ourselves and getting loved. It is so amazing how many times we need to hear it and yet forget it so easily. Yep, true enough. The principles that will make us happy are not complicated or numerous. I've gotten to where if I'm on a radio show or a television show, when the host says, well, tell me what real love is, I ask them, how long do I have? If they tell me they're going to ask me that before the show. If I have 60 seconds, I can describe it in 60 seconds. If I have 3 days, I can do it in 3 days. How much time you got? They're not complicated. They're not a bunch of them. But we have to hear them over and over, because otherwise the selfish and fearful messages of the world will intrude. They'll drill holes in our head and rule our feelings and behaviors. Fear doesn't wait for an invitation, whereas we actually have to invite the truth. Pay attention. You have to invite the truth. You have to invite love. You have to consciously build, whereas fear will intrude, fill your head, burn you down, and destroy whatever happiness you had. Doesn't require an invitation. So this person continues, I'm applying real love as much as I remember, but I have difficulty loving my mother. That's not unusual, since that's the place where you learn fear. All the time that I'm with her, I know that I'm not loving, but I still repeat the same pattern. I know I'm wrong. How wrong she is in not loving me is irrelevant. Okay, that's just brilliant. So you haven't mastered loving her yet. That's not a problem. But you see that it's your problem, not hers. Oh, that's a really brilliant start. See? as opposed to blaming her and then you're stuck. Because she's not going to change. She's not going to suddenly appear one morning with a halo around her head and go, oh, I've been making such a mistake all my life. You continue, I want to be loving to everyone, but when it comes to my mother, I cannot forget about all the unloving things that she has said and done to me. Of course, I know she didn't do anything to me. She was just drowning, empty and unloved. I'm now rereading the blogs, and I imagine I am loving to her all the time. Good for you, kid. This is how we achieve happiness, by working on how we can be more loving, not working on how others can be more loving or easier or more convenient. That never works. And yet we keep doing it over and over. It's all we know. It's all we were ever taught. If somebody's messing around with you, well, then you change them. But to keep doing over and over what doesn't work, stupid. So you understand that she's drowning, and then you believe it. Those two steps are different. There's understand, and then there's believe it, trust it. We say we understand, but if we're angry, we don't. I can't count how many times a day people tell, when I say something to somebody, and they say, mm-hmm, or okay, and I say, mm-hmm and okay aren't even a response. You just as well belch. Well, what do you mean? You've given me no indication at all that you understand what I just told you. Can you repeat it back to me in your words? No, they can't. Even if they could, that's still understanding. So sometimes I'll say something to somebody, they will repeat it back in their own words, and I say, you still don't understand. Well, how can you say that? Because you're still angry. If you really understood what I just said, your anger would have disappeared. That's what tells the truth about you. Not what you say, but how you feel and behave. You can count on that. How often do I hear this? A woman says to me, my husband loves me. He just beat her up last night. No, no, dear, he really doesn't. No, he really does. How do you know? Because he tells me he does. Yeah, pretty easy. You get mad at him, you have bruises on your face, and he tells you, oh, honey, I'm so sorry, I love you. And you want to hear that so badly, you believe it. But it's not true. You continue. Most of the time when I'm unhappy, I say to myself, do you choose to be happy and loving, or do you choose to be empty and unhappy? This is the best question I can ask myself. It always reminds me that happiness is a choice, and I'm free to make this choice every moment. How refreshing to hear, because that really is the question. Happy or not? Right or happy? Loving or not? Now, a question from you. It's now very easy for me to tell the truth about myself to loving people in real love. But it's very difficult to tell the truth about myself to my parents or others when I make a mistake regarding them. Do I need to tell them the truth about my mistakes? You can try it, really. It's worth an experiment, but it doesn't usually help. We tell the truth about ourselves mostly to find the love from people who have it. If you tell the truth about your mistakes to unloving people, they will almost never respond with acceptance. They can't. So, zero yield. If you tell the truth about your mistakes to unloving people, they won't even know what you're doing. Really. It makes no sense to them. Unloving people will actually go, what? When you tell the truth about yourself. Or they'll see it as a weakness and then just pound you into the ground. Well, if they were used to being pounded into the ground, great. But it's a zero yield. So tell the truth about yourself to people who can love you, and then with the people who can't love you, instead of telling them the truth about your mistakes, just practice being more loving. Which is really all they want anyway. They don't understand the process. There was a man wrote me who said that he was well, he's been looking to feel loved for, ever. And he's been in his head all his life. He had talked to me days before, but then he said that he had a great call with blank, one of the Real Love coaches. And he said it was a spectacular call. It was the best call in Real Love I've ever had. Now, keep in mind, that includes all the calls he's had with me. I'm really quite good with that. So he found somebody who, for whatever reason, was more loving than I am. I'm good with that too. Who used words that somehow sunk into this guy's heart, or maybe the guy was just more ready. I don't care. Like when you hand somebody a jar of pickles and you ask them to open it and they just snap it open and you've been trying for an hour and you say, hey, I loosened it for you. I don't care if I loosened the lid or not. For some reason, this coach reached this guy and he said, it changed my whole day. He said there were chores around the house that I've been putting off for months. And he said, I just felt so at peace, so calm, happy that I did these chores I've been putting off. And they were not a burden. Very cool. It affects every dang thing you do, down to cleaning out your desk or doing the laundry. And again, it proves it doesn't matter who gives it to you. Sure, it doesn't have to be from me. In this case, he got it from somebody else. Woohoo. This person says, I'm feeling a tremendous amount of fear this morning around the job that I had this past year as a teacher. A friend that I made while I had the job for the last year was getting married over the summer, but did not send an invitation to me to the wedding. I texted her to ask how everything went, which of course was kind of like a way of saying, you notice you didn't invite me, and she didn't reply. This was unusual. We weren't close, but we would meet occasionally for coffee. You're just dying for people's approval. That's why you wrote her. It was kind of to see, if maybe the invitation had gotten lost in the mail. You forget that it's not personal. There's so few people who genuinely care about other people. And when people don't care about you, it's about them. It's not about you. Really, I'm not kidding. It's important that you get this. How do I know? Because I love you. And if this particular coworker doesn't, then they must be relatively blind, or at least have a blind spot about you. You continue. Then right before the school year began, the school year that I'm now missing because, I don't have that job anymore, I saw a group of teachers that I worked with the past year in the parking lot as I was taking my son to see where his classes were located. They acted very cold and distant to me, even though I had worked with them the past year. One I worked with closely and considered to be a friend, and she acted odd, kind of strange. A couple things to think about. When something is off, something is out of the usual, like your status among people has changed, people do not know what to do. So what do? They avoid any situation that they don't know how to handle. People do this same thing around terminally ill people. They did studies. One of the early studies of behavior 100 years ago, when they weren't doing studies, that if once somebody's diagnosed as terminally ill, their doctor and nurses visit them 3 times less than they did before. We don't know what to say to terminally ill people. Their status has changed. It's like they're not among the living anymore, so we quit speaking to them. We do the same thing with foreigners, people who are of a race that we're not familiar with, even if we don't hate them. It's not about you. They don't know what to do with you in this new position of not only not being a teacher, which is how they knew you before, but being released from your job. It scares them. And second, you're kind of looking to have them treat you differently. You're afraid that you don't feel accepted, so you're looking for evidence and seeing it. You continue. I worked at the high school for my first year of teaching. It was a hard year and I was afraid a lot. I didn't handle classroom management well. Also, I wanted the kids to like me, which created even more problems. A teacher who needs their kids to like them is pretty much doomed. One time I wrote a note to a student I could see was really struggling personally. He was depressed and getting migraines a lot as a result. And I think the note was probably seen as too personal, as I told him that he was valuable and worthwhile and that he would find his way, even though he was not being accepted for who he was at home. That was none of my business and I should have kept out of it. Actually, it was a pretty great note, right up until you said you're not being accepted for who you are at home, at which point you're criticizing the kid's parents and then they will kill you. That alone would have caused enough problems to last you for the rest of the year. So it just stepped over into criticism. You have a good heart, honey. Like I've talked about on more than one occasion, we all have qualities that are who we really are. Those are always good. So for example, you are tender-hearted. Being tender-hearted is great. Being tender-hearted with unconditional love gives you the capacity to have an outpouring of concern for other people that other people might not. But if you add fear to tender-hearted, you become a prisoner. You become usable. So every good quality, if you add fear to it, becomes a disaster. It becomes a disaster for you. You become used. It becomes a disaster for the students because you don't have the guts to tell them how they need to behave and what work they need to do so they don't learn. It's awful. You say toward the end of the school year, it became clear that they were not going to offer me a contract for the next year. I felt hurt that they were not going to ask me back. I put in a lot of effort with little support. The principal and assistant principal, now notice, you said with little support, so you're already blaming them. Yeah, the principal and assistant principal are supposed to be supporting you, but you can't count on that. You really can't anywhere you go. We're in charge of our own choices. The principal and assistant principal took me into the office to tell me the news, too late for me to apply for any other jobs, more blaming, just kind of parenthetically. And they told me confusing things. One told me that I was too nice, and the other told me that by writing a list of rules that I was condescending to the students. The principal even told me what he was going to tell others who called for a recommendation, if I were going to get a job somewhere else, that I had difficulty with behavior management, and that's all he said. Nothing positive, just I couldn't handle behavior management. Actually, the two things they told you are not contradictory. He said you were too nice. What he really means is you're afraid, and you used niceness to control them. And then because you were too afraid, you made a whole list of rules which appeared condescending because rather than achieve classroom management by genuinely loving and teaching, you put up a strict list of rules. So both of them, the niceness and enabling and not correcting them, and your attempt to counteract that with controlling them with rules, are both just evidences of your fear. They're not contradictory. And this had to be really difficult for you to hear. But the question is now, what do you learn from it? What part of his evaluation was true? And why? And what could you do about it in the future? And how do you do this at home? How do you do this with your husband, this needing to be nice and manipulating people? How do you do this with your children? Because if you do it at school, you do it at home. This is an enormous opportunity to learn something, rather than an opportunity simply to be offended. This is great feedback, not great news for your career, but at some point the pain has to get bad enough that we're willing to look at what we do. You said, I made another mistake by trying to behave as if I could accept this with a sense of humor. hard to imagine. Oh, here's how. The principal sat in a dunking booth at a fundraising event shortly after, and I dunked him. He clearly did not see this as humorous. Do you think? But as an attack. So you go from wanting people to like you by enabling and by being nice and putting up rules and not offending anybody, to then, if that doesn't work, getting angry and attacking them, which I'm sure was subconscious on your part, but still attacking. You say, I applied for a job at the middle school and I was called in for an interview. The principal and I got along very well, and based on the interview, I thought I would be offered the position, but I didn't get it. I felt like the principal at the high school was doing me in. I was afraid I would never get a job in my county or anywhere else because of him, so I left teaching. And he might have been. He might have done you in with his recommendation, or in this case, lack of one. But you're back to what is your part in the difficulty that you had with teaching and behavior management. How do you do this everywhere? Because until you face that, you're going to keep having these problems. If you're not in teaching, you're going to have them in any other job. You're going to have them with your kids and partner. Face it. Get somebody to help you with this. Tell the truth about the whole thing, how the entire thing was your responsibility. Even though, yep, the principal and assistant principal probably should have been more supportive. Got that. Had they been, they would have given you repeated, not warnings, repeated observations about your behavior from the second week of school, and offered suggestions and sat in on your class and helped you. But I know principals and assistant principals, and they're overwhelmed with, oh, you know, everything like everybody else. I feel very afraid about this, even though I don't have any direct contact with him or them at the moment. My sons might have these teachers. I'm afraid of how they'll be affected. So notice what we've got so far. Afraid of what the principal thinks of you, afraid that the principal's talking about you, afraid of the assistant principal, afraid of what other teachers think of you, afraid of your students, afraid of how unnamed future teachers might treat your sons. See the pattern? There's only one word that's common to all of these phrases. Fear. It's a lot of fear. And then you continue. I'm afraid, same word, of some lies he may have told about me. Maybe, but he might have told the truth too, and that's the part you have to face. I'm disappointed that people I thought were my friends did not believe in me or care about me. Now, you're right about that. The principal's probably right about your classroom management. If people were perfectly unconditionally loving, they would have helped you all through the year, and they wouldn't avoid you now. But they're not. They're not perfectly unconditionally loving, and we can't ever count on that. But other people should have been more loving. Like the lady who came back from the park and her husband was annoyed that he didn't help her unpack the truck. Well, maybe he could have been more loving. We have to face our own selfishness and fears. Right now, you say, you continue, I feel worthless thinking about this. I really need to remember that you love me and others love me, but I'm having a hard time doing that. So stay right there. This is similar to what the man earlier in this chat talked about when he said, I'm afraid I'll never get this. I have held you for long periods. I have talked to you on the phone many times, responded to uncounted emails, and I've seen you. You knew you were worthwhile. You knew it. You knew it. I saw your face change. That's forever. It's not like I proved you were worthwhile for 3 minutes. No, if you're worthwhile, you stay that way. You don't lose it because you lose a job, or because you made a mistake, or whatever. So, what can you learn? How can you remember that you're worthwhile? And we've been talking about that in quite a number of ways just in this chat. So, that's the most important lesson. think we don't have time for the next question. So these have been great. I don't know whether they get better or I'm just getting more enthusiastic about them, but great questions. And these are questions that apply to every question has applied to 80% of the people who are listening in some way. Because how do I know? Because they apply to 80% of the people who call me and talk to me. Find it. The telling the truth about yourself, we talk about the importance of that, but there's some group leaders that get confused. Okay, tell the truth about yourself. And then they think they need to jump in and tell more truth about that person. Telling the truth about yourself really has the purpose of just finding the love you're looking for. It's the love that's the goal. It's not the truth telling. So find the love, trust the love, or getting it doesn't do any good. And then, as the one lady said, actually there was a lady and a man, then carry it around with you. Remember it. It happened. How many times did Columbus have to come over from the old world and touch land in the new world before the maps were altered? How many? I think he came to America 4 times, if I recall. But he came over one time and they changed the maps. That was it. Once. They didn't then forget about it and go, gosh, I wonder if the Earth's flat. Yeah, it's probably flat. Everybody thinks so. No. One time they learned that it wasn't flat. Poof, changed everything. Same with us. We feel loved once, completely loved, worthwhile. We trust it, and if we can remember it, it changes everything. Beautiful. See you in a week.